Hey there, and welcome to the daily podcast where wisdom smacks us with kisses or love taps. I'm MichelleSpiva, a wisdom strengthening coach, your host, and practical priestess of wisdom. Mwah. Join us daily to gain wisdom and mental strength as we tackle innovative thinking, address emotional and behavioral life traps, and yes, provide you with some practical how to's to wrap it all up. So settle in or crank up the speed 2x, whatever gets your mental processes firing as we dive in. Stay tuned. Yay! Hello there, mon ami. This is MichelleSpiva, your practical priestess of wisdom and host of the daily podcast Wisdom Smack. Mwah. And I want to invite you to join me today. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I have been currently investigating in my own life, and wisdom has done what she does and smacked me upside my head. And I want to share with you some of my findings, my insights, and hopefully trigger something in you to do likewise. So join me as we delve into and try to get to the point where you can start to discover what is your MVP, your minimum viable position. Join me on the flip. All right, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get into it. So, I want to ask you, what is your MVP? What is your minimum viable position? And let's go on and take a look at the scope of positioning that we want to talk about, because this is about you individually and then your immediate loved ones and community. So, positioning. Now, positioning in the business world is usually surrounded around marketing and how do you present yourself to your customers and your industry and the like. But there is also a positioning socially that we do, and it has another name called status. Oh yes. And what is your status? How do you present your persona to people outside? And a lot of people are finding that their former previous positioning is no longer sustainable. You can no longer go out and flaunt your wares, your goods, your investments, and all of these kinds of things, because when you have to stay at home and shelter in place for non-essentials, it doesn't matter. So now people are having to look at new positioning. And like I said, everything has changed. Everything has changed. Now, as a business owner, myself, who uh, positions myself to be in some type of service, entertainment, and support to a lot of non essentials, I am currently having to look at my positioning. And when it comes down to it, it goes back to the basics. So, let's start this off by recalibrating and getting a new perspective on what is the minimum viable position we can hold for survival, for thriving, for clarity, sanity, and propagation into a better future. So, this is really more so like a practical kind of conversation we're having today. And I'm hoping that by the end of this, you will have some new considerations to take in to evaluate how you move forward, how you move strategically. Okay. So, with that, I want to revisit my good old favorite Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, you don't have to go Google it. I'm going to paint the picture for you. So, imagine, if you will, a pyramid, and that pyramid has 7 horizontal platforms. So, yeah, 7 equal horizontal platforms from the base up to the tippy top. And with those platforms, imagine, if you will, that each one of them holds a important component of what makes us us, and that we are remiss if we don't take care of each one of those quote unquote platforms. Okay. And those platforms span all times of our life, from infancy to death, from the cradle to the grave, if you will. Okay. So those platforms, we're going to start at the base and go up. So those platforms, the first one is called basic needs. And when we think about basic needs, what we're talking about is we're talking about survival to be able to exist. And that means, do you have the proper oxygen mix on the planet to be able to inhale and exhale to survive? The next one is going to be safety and security. So once you have air to breathe, water to drink, those types of things that will keep your body working, we're going to move into the next level, which is safety and security. And so, with safety and security, we're talking about, do you now have shelter? Do you have job security? Do you have defense against those who would harm you? People, elements, monsters. I meant animals, but you get the gist of it. And then after that, the third level, that's where this pyramid starts really taking shape to, oh, this is a pyramid. And that one is love and belonging. Do you have interaction in your society, relationship, family, friends? Do you have a sense of identity and meaning in relation to other people? Meaning that you fit in. Then the next one, which is a fourth one, it's called the cognitive. Now, cognitive meaning thought and those types of things. And it's all about your meaning, your quest, your awareness of who you are, how you think, the knowledge that you hold. What is your philosophy or your thoughts on existence, existentialism, whatever you want to call that? And then the fifth level is going to be self esteem. And that self esteem is, what is your confidence level? What is your sense of accomplishment? What do you count as a success? What things do you tout as your legacy? How do people view you? That's where that status and that positioning comes from. Then after that is self-actualization. That's getting up there. That's the sixth level. It used to be the top level, but Maslow amended it some years later. So this used to be the tippy top, but this is right under the tippy top. And that next one is called self-actualization. And that is where you strive to make a difference. You strive to have peak performance. You're problem solving. You're at your best, you're at mastery level. And then that capstone, the seventh level, is called transcendence. And that transcendence is where you move outside of yourself to transcend your identity of who you are. This is where altruism, volunteerism, charity, philanthropy, and all of those live, because you're now at a point where you understand the relevance of transcending out of yourself to not try to feed your ego, if you will. Okay. So the reason why we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs when we're talking about what is your minimum viable position is because you have to go back down to basic. Nothing is new. I mean, nothing is the same. Everything is new now. And because of that, we're finding that our very survival has to be reevaluated. And when I took a recent inventory of where I am on this spectrum, I failed. I'm just going to be honest. I failed. And I failed because I wanted to do as honest and objectively as possible an assessment of, could I sustain, could I live on each one of these levels with new rules, meaning that I couldn't take anything for granted outside of what I could do and produce. And when I say I failed. And the reason why is because my living skills training is woefully lacking. And I'm not going to start talking about survivalist and prepper, but you can learn a lot from them. And, for whatever, I never really had any thoughts one way or another, but I do see the efficacy now of definitely having a lot of those skills. And so looking at What level did I falter when it came to survival? Honey, let's just even go to safety and security. And I was like, I've got to do better. I have got to do better. And I had already been looking at ways to be self sustainable, to cook and sew and farm, and even learn how to do some building. But my ability to know that I needed to do that and what I actually have by way of that, ooh, far and few between. And so I had to bump myself back down to safety and security. Basic needs at this current time, we still have good air to breathe and we still have fairly good water. If you have to go and find it, there are ways you can make filters. And I even have a few little those survivalist bottles with the filters in them, if you have to get something out of a stream, but nothing that's going to like be a big deal. And so, like I said, looking at all of this and getting as much of a understanding of a evaluative understanding of where I was like, oh my goodness, my minimum viable position is shot. It really is. And the reason why I say that is because thinking about going to the grocery store and relying on the old distribution channels, the old way of how we got our food, how we got textiles and clothing and all of that, I was slammed with the realization that we have become a country where I live in the United States. We have become a country of outsourcing, where we outsource everything. We don't make anything. And I was like, "Oh." And the reason why I said that because when I looked to see things that I took for granted, and I was like, "Well, why is this gone? And why is it?" And they're like, "Well, we haven't gotten, our imports from, a lot of countries that have been hard hit with the pandemic." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're in a pickle." And that's when I started having to be honest with myself that there is a new day and I have to be aware of my minimum viable position. And when I say minimum viable, MVP, that's that level where you falter in your survival. And I'm going to ask you to do that. Just using, any kind of thing. If you don't want to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you, it's a pretty good way of understanding where you are. Because when I looked at it and I tried to honestly look at how I was matriculating through all the levels, because that's what you really should be doing. It's not where, you build one and then you get to the other. It just kind of like tells us the different levels that we operate on, and I can honestly say right now, I believe that I'm still operating on the upper levels. It's those lower levels of basic and safety that I really have got to shore up and can no longer take for granted. And that's not a bad thing. And this is not about being a fearmonger or any of that kind of stuff. What it just simply means is that that great pendulum that we talk about of things that go from left to right and in between, the gradients of, has swung to the other side where we're all needing to be more aware, self aware of where we fall on that. And so, what I wanted to ask you is what do you make that sustains you? That's the question I'm grappling with. So much so that I've been thank goodness for access to YouTube. I've been looking at everyday people who live in cul-de-sacs around America just like I do and who have managed to be able to start gardening for themselves out of 5-gallon buckets to produce at least their lively vegetables to be able to make it. And how to do that when you don't have a lot of land, you have HOA ordinance like I do, good Lord, and all of that other stuff. And just by even getting my mind to start looking at those and getting prepared for that, that has been eye opening for me because I grew up with people who knew how to farm, who knew how to garden. And I'm back to having to watch videos to make sure I don't overwater something. Learning what the depth is to bury a seed and the germination process and how to do it as chemically free as possible. I'm telling you. You know, having to learn. I don't drink coffee, but having to learn. Do not put coffee grounds in your grass. I mean, in your dirt, and all these other things that I just was not aware of. But this is not about me to that granular of level. This is about us having a real conversation to get inspired to see what wisdom is really showing us for right now, and to not be so used to hanging out in those upper levels of our awareness on that need scale that we forget that there is an erosion of our basic needs and of our safety and security needs. So it's a new day, and therefore it calls for a new way. Now, this is another thing I was arrested in. And like I said, I was like, what is wrong with me? My family that I grew up in, when I think about it, was pretty self sufficient. My mother could sew anything. Yeah. My grandparent and she took care of us. My grandparents farmed and my stepfather was a hunter and he could actually build stuff. And I was like, wow, why did I get so freaking bougie? Because I'm gonna tell you, I look at it, I was like, Habitat for Humanity, why didn't I take advantage of it when I had the opportunity to go learn some stuff? Because I'm gonna tell you, watching HGTV and DIY shows on YouTube is not the same as getting out there and actually swinging a hammer. It is not. It is not. And the last time I actually tried to make something, I ended up with wobbly chairs and a dining table that you could risk your life if you sat at it. So much so that one of my siblings had to come help me because I was challenged. And now, looking at what things look like, at least through the remainder of this current year, it requires that we go back and we shore up our positioning. We shore up our ability to survive and hopefully thrive. Like I said, out of those skills, I sat down and I wrote them out. I was like, okay, where am I on? Being able to protect myself and my domain, you know? And at this particular time, I'm like, I'm okay, with some of this stuff, I need to probably go back out and do a little more target practice. I definitely do, yeah. I possibly need, not possibly, let's just be honest with it. Yeah, yeah, let's be honest. I definitely need to start looking at ways to get my hands dirty again with learning the basics of carpentry again, and not just what I remember as a kid learning how to build a playhouse, but real stuff that you can actually support yourself in. I don't know how I'm going to do that with distancing right now, but I'm gonna try my darndest. I really am. And not taking for granted things that they'll just be there just because there's a store that says they're supposed to be there, because a lot of people are getting their feelings hurt when they go to these stores expecting things to be there, and then the realization hits that not only is it there, but they can't tell you when it's going to be there. And let's not even talk about what is going to happen when it hits that we can't replace these things soon, and the demand skyrockets. In a capitalist society, supply and demand are warring sisters. They war. If you got just even a teenichy, as my grandparents used to say, for to mean little, if you got just a teenichy bit more of either or the or, they beat the other one down. And so if your demand is going up for foodstuffs, for necessary things, for water, for seed, for all of that, and your ability to gain the currency, the fiat, the credits, whatever you want to call it, the money to get it goes down, you are pushed back down to being a person who needs to take care of your own basic needs and your own safety and security. And it just comes down to that. And so, with that, like I said, I wrote it down and I was like, how well can I take care of myself? Do I know how to build? Do I know how to sew, to cook, to farm, to hunt? Do I know how to provide self defense? Do I know how to provide protection and safety? And do I know how to procure or secure water that won't kill me? Understanding stuff, um, of not stuff, understanding the ways of nature. Do I really understand that? The other day I found myself staring at the birds on my lawn and looking at how they would peck out whatever they were pecking out, whether it was worms or whatever, and looking at how they were free to just be in all of our lawns without the need to fly away because kids are running or cars are driving by. And as I was looking at them peck and do what it was that they normally would do, I noticed something. And that was that what seemed to be just random scanning of the ground was actually an elegant pattern. And that pattern was kind of like watching them home in on an area and then diligently work the area. And as one would start to work the area, others would come in. And guess what? The one who had began working the area didn't stop, didn't try to fight the others away. And then it became evident that they were a community working together. And so the biggest takeaway from doing this exercise of what was my minimum viable position was that I was leaving out the component of community and how important it is that, yes, we be very self sufficient. Yes, we learn how to do all these things for ourselves. But it still holds true that if you are a jack of all trades, you will not necessarily be a master of them all. And we can't leave out the variable that's not spoken here of community. And that's when it hit me that the beauty of Maslow's hierarchy of needs was that the very next level, once you move from basic needs and then you move into safety and security, the very next level, that third integral level, was love and belonging, meaning how you interact with others. Who do you love? Who do you hate? Who do you work with? Who do you shun? How do you fit into this community? How do you do that? And I want to say something about community and neighborhood and all of that. There is a difference between a neighborhood and a community. A neighborhood is where you have a group of people who come and assemble for the sake of sheltering, for the sake of where they live. They might even protect each other's dwellings. But a community turns into a living organism where it becomes the smallest self-sustainable unit for a group of people. You see, with a neighborhood, you can't sustain. You have to leave out of that neighborhood to go and find things. So think of neighborhood as base camp. Neighborhood is where the tents are set up. But the community is going to be the surrounding area where you go and you hunt and you fish, where you trade with other communities, you go to a marketplace, those types of things. And it started dawning on me that in this particular time, we're going to have to become more aware of our contribution to community. I've said this on other podcasts and I'll say it again. When I was growing up, my grandparents, they didn't call it a co op, but they belonged to many co ops. I remember in their neighborhood, we lived in a small town, but it was a college town. And so we had streets with different people on the street and things. And from time to time, there were no HOA fees. So, HOAs or whatever. But there was pride in, when you lived on this street and those kinds of things. And they would get together from time to time. And sometimes a part of the street or all of the street would agree to go in on something. And so I remember my grandparents having, like I said, they had a garden, but they also had farming land with my uncle who was outside of our neighborhood because we had to go drive to it, where there were acres and acres that they would grow things on. And then across the street, I'm not going to call their names, but there was a family who had acreage for livestock and for livestock farming. And all of the co-ops would agree each year. They would put in their monies and they would procure livestock that would serve as their meat, if you would. And when it came time for harvesting of food and all of those things, we had a processing plant and all of that local. All of this was local, where the livestock would be taken, processed, and then everything was divvied up according to your share and all of that. And the thing that I didn't realize that I needed to realize was that my grandparents and their neighbors did not have to really necessarily depend on grocery stores. They would go and they would use them, but it wasn't where they had these uh, uh, astronomical fees. So they would go for things like, toilet paper, toothpaste, that kind of stuff. But when it came to food, they might pick up something here or there, but in huge deep freezers and secondary refrigerators out on the back porch, yes, we had those. There would be vegetables, and there would be shelves for canned goods and meats packaged in that butcher paper with stamps of what the cut was, when it was done, and all of this. And I had taken that for granted. And I had taken it for granted in that, in the way things became just recently in my adult life, I didn't have a need for community. As long as I had those credits, I could go to the grocery and I could get what I needed and I could come back and I didn't have to depend on any of my neighbors, any of my community, because everybody was able to go and do for yourself, tend for yourself. And it took me watching those little birds on my lawn to remember that the pendulum has swung and we need to get back to basics. We need to understand that you might be able to do some of it good, but you can't do all of it good. The last time I checked, I'm not able to produce what we would call quality toilet paper on my own. I'm just not. I'm not. I really am not. And so I had to take a bit of humble pie. And instead of just thinking, I've got to do it all, I've got to learn how to build, sew, cook, farm, and hunt. No, what I have to do is I have to remember that for all of the basics, all of the security and the self defense and all of that, I still have to remember that I am a part of a community with love and belonging. And I need to make sure that I become reintegrated into that and do my part and understand that this is a new day and a new way. So, when looking at what's your minimum viable position, I hope that I save you the task of not thinking that it's all up to you, that only what you can do for yourself of sufficiency is going to work. Now, I'm talking to you, community dwellers. Now, if you are a survivalist, if you are a self-sufficiency type of person, good on you, God bless you. But for the rest of us, this is a message that wisdom is trying to call out in the streets to let us know that when with all you're getting, with all of your mindfulness, understand that it's going to come back down to how you as a person provide and produce, as well as how you as a person work in your smallest denominator of a city or whatever, when you work with your community, your local people who do have farming, your local people who do um, provide uh, things like sewing and building and sheltering. And it's a wake up call for a lot of us because some, unfortunately, are going to figure out that, let alone a neighborhood, they don't really live in a community and they need one. So I am going to go out on a limb and predict that when looking at your minimum viable position, a lot of people are going to find that they're going to have to move to a community where they can become integrated to get the necessary support for not only survival, but for thriving. Because, like I said before, basic needs, that air you breathe, the water you drink, and then safety and security, of your home, self-defense and the like. But that one that sits right on top of it, right in the middle, is that love and belonging. And that is how we get along, how we interact, and how we commune with other people in a larger society that will help us provide for ourselves and for everyone to be a healthy living organism that can thrive, that can grow, and that can succeed. So, I do want to ask you, what's your minimum viable position? At what level do you start to falter when it comes to your survival? What do you do and what do you make and how do you contribute to help you sustain? So, with that, yeah, y'all, my time is up. I thank you for yours. This has been Michelle Spiva, your practical priestess of wisdom, with, I hope, a very practical and useful podcast today. Don't forget to check the show notes. There are ways to contact me and even to directly support me for the show. And because this is daily, I am going to see you tomorrow. You have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye. And that's going to do it for today's podcast of Wisdom Smack with Michelle Spiva. If you like this podcast, please help us get the word out. Like, comment, subscribe, and even share. And if you really like it, please help us continue to get the word out by considering using this show's link for Amazon. So when you want to go to Amazon and you do all of your general shopping, please use MichelleSpiva.com/AMZ. It's simple as that. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and this show might receive a little bit of commission that will go towards helping to further get these episodes out to you and to others. So thank you so much for listening. This has been Michelle Spiva with Wisdom Smack. Bye.